For years, Robyn Brown stood on the periphery of a family sustained by mutual faith, plural marriage, and tenuous harmony. But now, her name resonates through courtrooms. Whispers of betrayal propagate across social media, and even her own former loyal followers are demanding the question too heavy to deny. Did Robyn Brown dismantle the Brown family? As legal documents emerge and footage is replayed with fresh, suspicious eyes, a disturbing story is constructed. The mother, once portrayed as the peacemaker, now stands accused of isolating Cody, eliminating the other wives, and subtly guiding the empire she built together into devastation. Behind the courtroom walls, she remains mute, not shattered, not rattled, but unruffled, practically rehearsed, and while Christine, Janelle, and even Meri attempt to reclaim pieces of themselves, Robyn stays by Cody's side, unyielding, loyal, and bitterly resented. But this time, loyalty may have a price. A verdict is imminent, and if the charges are true, Robyn stands to lose more than just the family name. She stands to lose everything they built in secret. This is not reality TV anymore. This is a reckoning. But there was once a time when Robyn Brown was the missing piece of the Brown family jigsaw. She crept into their lives quietly, swathed in warm smiles and good intentions. On camera, she was the sweet soul, the one who infused fresh life into a tired edifice. But behind the sheen of edit on reality TV, perhaps something darker was germinating. Now, Robyn's name doesn't evoke comfort. It evokes conflict. And now, with courtroom lights blinding and sealed records emerging, the truth won't remain buried. She didn't merely become part of the family. Some think she ended it. In recent months, rumors gave way to accusations. The court proceedings, previously centered on asset distribution and custody issues, have started shifting. A private investigation allegedly uncovered a line of monetary entanglements, trust funds that vanished, real estate transactions transferred, and in-house family loans that vanished without record. And at the middle of much of those transactions stood Robyn. The woman once professing to desire cohesion is now being accused of structuring power in secret. She claims she only wished for safety. The others claim she wanted control. And control, when abused, always returns with payback. Christine's exit was the first fissure. Audience members saw the sorrow, the remorse, but few understood just how deeply the tension had gone. In sealed testimony now leaked in part through anonymous sources, Christine reportedly declared that Robyn was never a sister wife. She was a wedge, a willing one. Meri, previously quiet and frequently devoted, subsequently verified she felt overlooked, diminished, even manipulated. Janelle, the most practical of the wives, allegedly filed paperwork indicating suspicious gaps in joint financial accounts, ones only Robyn and Cody could access. TLC might have presented smiles, but the paper trail was crying something altogether different. When trust is broken quietly, it breaks louder than anyone can imagine. But it wasn't just the women raising alarm. In the background, two of the show's former producers were working with lawyers, indicating that some of the family decisions made for the show were strongly manipulated or even orchestrated by Robyn to guard her reputation and alienate the rest. Audiences used to question why Robyn cried so frequently. Now some question whether it was guilt or game playing, because while the Brown family unraveled in public, Robyn and Cody remained behind locked doors, untouched, united, and increasingly defiant. Sometimes silence isn't protection, it's preparation. The most shocking turn came just days before the final hearing. A subpoenaed email thread between Robyn and a private estate attorney suggested premeditated financial restructuring, allegedly done months before Christine left, while all wives still lived under the illusion of equality. In one of the emails, Robyn seems to wonder how they can lock up what's ours just in case the house falls apart. The date? Almost a year before they actually split. The implication? She knew it was going down, and she made plans. If there is a signature for betrayal, Robyn might have written it first. Today, with the final verdict hanging in the air, public opinion is evenly divided. To some, Robyn is the sad one, strong-armed into standing by a man, disintegrating with her taking the blame for the whole empire's downfall. But to others, she is the manipulator, calculating, protective of herself, and heavily invested in choices that shattered trust irreparably. With Cody again under increased legal scrutiny, Robyn stands by his side, pale, motionless, and inscrutable. She hasn't said a word to the press. She hasn't commented on social media, but she doesn't have to. When the storm is finally over, the most quiet one usually stands in the middle. There are whispers the judge will unseal parts of the case if new evidence is introduced, testimonies from older kids, previously unaired footage, and bank records connected to a now defunct LLC. If those records come out, it won't simply redefine the way fans see Robyn. It could set off a full probe into financial abuse under polygamy systems, particularly in reality TV context. What started as a family show could now set precedent for media and legal history both. This is not divorce anymore. It's about legacy and responsibility. And yet, through it all, Robyn stays with Cody. At court, they sit side by side. Out of court, they depart in silence. No cameras, no words, just two individuals holding on to each other amidst the ashes. Some call that love. Others call it survival. And perhaps, in the end, it's both. But whether or not she's a misunderstood mess, or a master manipulator, one thing is no longer up for debate. Robyn Brown is no longer a supporting character. She's the story now, and the ending hasn't been written yet. The courthouse steps were quieter than usual that morning. No cameras, no paparazzi, just soft murmurs behind shades and closed doors. But within, the air pulsed with energy. Robyn Brown appeared exactly 3 minutes before the hearing time, clad in subdued navy, and accompanied by legal representatives. Her face, once one with tearful confessions on reality TV, was impassive. Her look sculpted not for sympathy, but for strategy. This wasn't a divorce case. This wasn't even a family case. Not truly. It was one of what followed: the breakdown of trust, the abrupt shifting of property, the strange silences in bank statements and signatures that shouldn't have existed. It was a case of intent, of whether or not Robyn had quietly orchestrating the breakdown of a family for her own preservation. And for the first time since her television debut, the narrative wasn't hers to control. Secrets remain hidden for years, until money drags them into the open. The courtroom had already heard pieces of what was to come. Accountant testimonies, legal intern affidavits, private estate records pulled through court orders. But this session was the beginning of something more. A complete timeline recreation. All of the big decisions the Brown family had made since Robyn's entrance would now be scrutinized not as episodes of emotional disorder, but as transactions. Each step a potential lead in a bigger plan. They began with the Flagstaff move. To outsiders it seemed like a fresh start. On paper though, it was a logistical and financial nightmare. Multiple properties bought in quick succession, titles shifted between LLCs, and Robyn and Cody's name appearing more and more frequently, while the others faded quietly off the document. Janelle's property was never fully finalized. Meri's cabin stalled without reason. Christine, as it turned out, was kept in the dark on fundamental financial matters. In those days, it was dismissed as miscommunication. Now, under oath, it appeared differently. One of the forensic accountants summed it up bluntly: "These patterns don't reflect mismanagement. They reflect exclusion. Power does not always manifest as screaming. Occasionally it signs quietly." The prosecution presented new evidence: a series of emails between Robyn and a family money man, dated just weeks prior to the Flagstaff relocation. It was neutral, professional, but the substance sent chills. Robyn had asked for a breakdown of how each wife's name could be safely disentangled from major assets if they were to relocate. There were no references to plural family consultation, only Robyn and Cody, and an urgency that in retrospect sounded orchestrated. And then there was the trust fund. The Browns had long made public declarations of creating a moneyed legacy for their large number of children. What the audience didn't realize was that, quietly in the background, a private education trust had been created with money earned by the show's early seasons. Each child was to be listed as a beneficiary, but the documents spoke otherwise. As of 2 years ago, the setup was altered, and 6 of the kids had been quietly dropped. Christine's daughter was among them. So was Janelle's son. Robyn's children, still on the list, still safe. When loyalty is a commodity, arithmetic never lies. Christine, who had already provided several statements, wasn't in attendance, but her voice rang out in the paperwork. "I didn't leave because of Robyn," one of her affidavits stated. "I left because I was no longer allowed to belong." The words hit something in the judge's face, a brief flutter of embarrassment. Belonging in plural marriage isn't a privilege, it's a vow. And if Robyn had willfully destroyed that connection while holding fast to her own place, the meaning was disastrous. Outside the courtroom, Robyn's silence was interpreted in different ways. Some saw strength, others saw guilt. But inside, her lack of response to each accusation only added weight to the narrative forming around her. She hadn't defended herself. She hadn't denied a thing. She simply let the legal process unfold as if she had rehearsed it. When you've rehearsed a life for cameras, reality doesn't shake you. By mid-session, they shifted to the show's financial agreements. TLC's contracts with the Browns had long been confidential. But for the case, redacted copies were placed into the record. And they were eye-popping. In later seasons, when things between the wives became intolerable, a bonus formula was added, a structure for keeping cohesive screen dynamics. But only one side had asked for it: Robyn. The bonus, as it turned out, would be paid only if the family stayed legally or spiritually intact for another 2 seasons. Robyn had a strong economic incentive to hold off on the disintegration, while the other wives were psychologically disintegrating. The session was over in a hushed whisper, a piece of paper signing off on a day that had raised questions rather than answers. But one thing was certain now. Robyn had not just been a character in the Brown family drama. She had been a tactician, playing an empire of emotional connections like a chessboard. And now the board was turned over. When all your plays have been for survival, the game is never serene. As the courtroom lights flashed against the clipped lines of case files and ancient receipts, Robyn sat in calculated calm. But the prosecution wasn't going to leave this case stuck in the moment anymore. Not today. The next hearing won't be about legal documents or contested property. It'll be about origin, motive, pattern. Because in order to see how the Brown family disintegrated, the court had to look back, not to Flagstaff or Las Vegas, but to prior to the cameras ever rolling, prior to Robyn ever bearing the name Brown, back to another last name, another marriage, another woman altogether. The past doesn't die. It waits for its moment. Papers filed that morning were silent but devastating. Divorce documents from Robyn's initial marriage, custody forms, disclosures of finances. But it wasn't what was said that changed the mood. It was how it was said. It was the accusations of manipulation, alienation, and calculated violence that supposedly served Robyn in her entirety. Her former husband had remained quiet for a long time. But a statement, short and typed, was entered into the record. She always knew what she wanted, it said. She wasn't crazy, she was calculating. That adjective, calculating, stuck with her. In the early years, Robyn had publicly talked of heartbreak, of having been a victim of a broken system. Viewers perceived her as a survivor. But behind the scenes, patterns were emerging even then. Strategic alliances with church officials, custody requests that put assets first, witness friends who gradually pulled away without ever completely revealing why. And then came the meeting with Cody. Destruction sometimes doesn't crash. It comes in the form of rescue. The court brought forward journal entries from Robyn's early journal, leaked by a distant relative years ago, and all but forgotten by most. There, she described a longing not only for a new family, but for a new role in a family. "I don't want to be someone's third or fourth," she wrote. "I want to belong to someone completely, even if I have to share the name." That entry would become the foundation of what prosecutors now alleged, that Robyn's integration into the Browns wasn't romantic at all. It was strategic. She didn't merely marry into a family, she positioned herself within its seat of power. She wasn't interested in multiple love, she was interested in single control. Power masquerading as vulnerability is the most insidious kind. The judge summoned one of the show's old producers. He was not keen, but his testimony, carefully crafted, left no doubt Robyn was familiar with the cameras. She knew production. As others faltered on fame, Robyn evolved quickly. She'd ask for reshoots. She'd alter lines if they didn't promote her image, he explained. She knew just how to act her part. Then, it wasn't an issue. Reality shows are built on personalities. But now the video was being played back, not as entertainment, but as evidence. There was one where Robyn just sat still while Christine wept over being replaced. Robyn didn't try to console her. She didn't say anything. She just observed, as if she knew it was coming. You don't cry about someone's fall when you took away the step. Then the financial revelations, the initial ones. Robyn's jewelry venture, started with assistance from family finances, had quietly collapsed, but Cody still funded it. even after losses, even when the other wives complained. The court introduced documents which indicated that Cody personally diverted show income to assist in paying Robyn's business debt, at a time when Janelle was working overtime to pay bills at home. It wasn't against the law, but it was a tale of favoritism, of emotional power manipulated into financial. And as the wives seethed with resentment, Robyn didn't blink. She played loyal. But behind the scenes, she bargained advantage after advantage. A private rental residence, special privilege over family income, and most of all, Cody's attention. Sometimes control masquerades as sacrifice, until the receipts tell the truth. As the session went on, whispers of emotional isolation filtered into the file. Testimony from therapists who had worked with Brown family members throughout the years, jotting down one wife's growing feeling of invisibility, another's confession that she felt parented by Robyn, not supported. And Cody? The files portrayed him as emotionally fused, sensitive to Robyn's moods, isolated from others. This was not a legal case on paper, but in a motive case, it drew the picture prosecutors wanted. Robyn didn't just survive longer than the others, she set them up to walk out. That, they contended, is the distinction between strategy and circumstance. It's not sabotage if they quit on their own, but what if you push them? As the judge brought the day's session to a close, a final document was slipped quietly into the record. A sealed affidavit, scheduled for future release, speculated to be from one of the older Brown children. It wasn't heard aloud, but the mere fact of its presence sent a shiver. For if the children start to talk, the legacy isn't simply broken, it's lost. And Robyn, she exited the courtroom much as she'd entered, silent, collected, unfazed, but something had shifted. Her history no longer covered her like a shield. It was Exhibit A. When the truth arrives draped in old things, nobody gets out clean. Court continued under a different refrain. The emotional charged tension of Session 2 had shifted. Now it was numbers, names, and notarized transactions. Cold, calculated. Just the way Robyn enjoyed it, at least in the eyes of the prosecution. In this session, lawyers weren't searching for sensationalism. They were searching for deeds, titles to property, transfers of businesses, names deleted, names inserted. And in nearly every detectable pattern, a single name kept popping up at the hub of control: Robyn Alice Brown. Love wears off, but control has a paper trail. The documents began years earlier, quiet amendments to shared assets during the family's Las Vegas years. Cody had convinced the other wives that dividing up property legally would protect everyone. But somewhere between the signatures and smiles, Janelle's name disappeared from one deed, then Meri's, then Christine's. When the dust settled, Robyn's name wasn't just on her own land, but on more than her fair share. And Cody? He signed every one of them. The court presented a sequence of tax returns, subtle but telling. While all four wives listed individual income from TLC royalties, only Robyn's reflected joint access to Cody's LLC, the business structure employed for brand licensing and revenue streaming. She had access. The rest did not. She could authorize transactions, transfer funds, even withhold account visibility. It was no coincidence. It was an architecture. The attorneys then presented a former financial planner who had briefly worked with the family when they were making the Flagstaff transition. He was given one warning at the time: too many assets, not enough signatures. But it was heeded. Especially not by Cody, who had already started diverting common profits into a new privately held trust account by then. Guess who was the joint trustee? Robyn. The courtroom fell silent when the trust documents flashed on the screen. Legally submitted, stamped, authenticated. The Brown Family Asset Reserve, established in 2021, months before Christine left and years before word got out of any fracture. There were 3 beneficiaries listed: Cody, Robyn, and one of Robyn's kids from her prior marriage. Not one child shared with the other wives was included. The betrayal wasn't verbalized. It was signed, sealed, and financed. To the general public, Robyn had been the last wife remaining, obedient, grieving, observing the family fracture and keeping Cody's hand in hers. But behind court walls, the prosecution contended that Robyn hadn't responded to a breakdown, she'd facilitated it. One wife had even sent an email read into evidence saying, "I don't know when it happened, but we've all become guests in their empire." That was Janelle. And when Christine left, the blowback wasn't just emotional, it was financial. because the departure of one wife meant a shift in show contracts, a loss of income, a fractured brand. Cody, eager to preserve a vision, leaned harder into Robyn's present. And Robyn, they said, leaned back, but not with ease, with domination. She supposedly bargained her own higher royalties. She supposedly signed off on new provisions that cut down the other women's residuals. By season 17, Robyn's legal share was almost twice as high as the others. It wasn't sister wives anymore. It was the Robyn and Cody franchise. In court, the defense team struggled to counter. They asserted the other wives had severed financial involvement voluntarily, that Robyn hadn't taken power away. She'd been reluctantly awarded it. But asked for any written evidence of that assertion, emails, contracts, meeting minutes, they couldn't. Because there were none. And then came the bombshell. An anonymous tip submitted to the court as a sealed affidavit. It alleged that Robyn had insisted on becoming Cody's legal wife months before Meri's spiritual divorce, only after a financial planner explained the implications for Social Security, inheritance rights and survivor benefits. This wasn't about love. It was about legacy. The courtroom gasped when the judge permitted the statement to be read aloud. Robyn, the source alleged, had met with the planner privately, then coerced Cody into legally divorcing Meri for the sake of streamlining paperwork. To the critics of Robyn, it was the last piece of the puzzle. She hadn't merely stood by while the family unraveled. She hadn't merely gained favor. She'd orchestrated it. Methodically, lawfully, subtly. Even the family's publishing contracts, books, appearances, podcast proposals, reportedly passed through an LLC based in Arizona. Ownership, Robyn and Cody. Not the Browns, not Sister Wives, LLC, but just the two of them. When the story concludes, make sure you own the rights. Court observers started calling what had occurred something else. Not fraud, not theft, but clandestine consolidation. A trend observed in corporate takeovers, not wedlock. One partner insidiously acquiring control of joint power until the others were just shoved aside. And Robyn, always calm in the visitors' gallery, didn't deny, didn't flinch. She just listened, as if she'd spent years waiting for this moment. Some queens require no throne, only a contract and a witness. The court hadn't prepared for cameras, not from the external world, but from the past. As the lawyers dug deeper, they started procuring old footage from TLC producers, unseen scenes, snipped moments that were trimmed for time or tone. But in court, none of it counted. This wasn't reality television. This was discovery. In every glance, every whisper, every eye roll, suddenly it was all evidence. The footage showed small things first. A bitter glance between Robyn and Janelle during a family discussion, Cody reassuring Robyn behind Meri's back. Then, a clip from a family meeting after their move to Flagstaff. Robyn calmly suggesting that maybe fewer voices would mean more clarity. She wasn't just present in the fall. She was narrating it. The tape started to do what no legal document ever could: record mood, manipulation, and subtle authority. In one never-aired clip, Robyn gently challenged Christine's parenting choices while Cody silently agreed. In another, Meri attempted to re-enter the family conversation, only for Robyn to silence her with a gentle "let's not make this about the past." To the outside world, maybe those remarks were harmless, but to a jury, patterns, seeds of discord. And then the biggest change of all, Brown children testifying. When the next generation testifies, no longer is it about the past, it's about legacy. Leon, Meri's child, submitted a written statement describing Robyn as the wedge, not the glue. Gwendolyn, Christine's daughter, posted a video just days before testifying, calmly accusing Robyn of emotional control masked as kindness. The court permitted two of the older children to testify in person. One was Janelle's oldest, Logan, who talked about watching his mother shrink over years to maintain peace. The other was Madison, who talked about Robyn as the mirror that made the rest of us feel like ghosts. Robyn never cracked up while they testified. She slowly blinked, hands clasped, eyes cast downward. But the room seemed more oppressive than ever. It was no longer merely a trial by law. It was a trial by image, by intent, by heart. Control without compassion becomes corrosion. The media storm erupted anew outside the courthouse. Robyn, no longer protected by Cody's defensiveness and TLC's editing suite, was laid bare. Raw, unfiltered, and alone. Online discussions erupted. Hashtags trended. #Robyn ruined it. #justice for Christine. the last wife, standing. Court couldn't hold the tempest anymore. It spilled over into headlines, TikToks, podcasts, and each time Robyn exited the courthouse in her black coat and stoic smile, she was more than a defendant. She was a symbol. And symbols are powerful until they fall apart under the pressure of too many stories. When the truth is collective, silence is no longer strong. Not even Cody was immune. In a surprising mid-course correction, the prosecution asked him to take the stand again, this time on a new premise. Did Robyn ever have any sway over his choices against the other wives? He hesitated. He said no. Then he said, not directly. Then, after they'd shown him clips and documents from earlier sessions, he let out a deep breath, cracked, and admitted, I wanted peace. She offered it. I took it. But the court didn't require peace. It required clarity. And what Cody provided was a hazy confession. He gave Robyn the power, since she was the only one who never questioned. That was not love. That was submission. Even the strongest man will obey the softest voice, if it tells him that he's always right. Christine sat in the back row for that time. No tears, just a nod. Janelle wasn't there, but her attorney released a written statement. Years of loss don't require courtroom validation. But now the world sees. Meri, always quiet, published a solitary quote on the internet. The greatest manipulator is the one who convinces you you're safe. That was it. No hashtag, no caption, just that. Within the courtroom, the judge became more subdued. This case, he said, isn't any more about who gets what. It is about how we arrived. And that path is uncomfortably familiar to too many. Because this wasn't just the Brown family anymore. It was a reflection of fractured allegiances, silent betrayals, and the price of selecting comfort over confrontation. It wasn't a court case. It was a cultural autopsy. Robyn went back to her seat. Her team was muttering possibility. She nodded subtly, and then she gazed up, not at the judge, not at the jury, but at the back of the room, at the crowd, at the cameras, at the eyes of the world. She did not say a word, but her face told it all. This was not finished. The judge scheduled final arguments. Spectators were excluded from the next hearing. Only family, attorneys, and court personnel permitted. The trial had gotten too personal, too delicate. And for Robyn Brown, the woman who stood accused of quietly taking apart a legacy forged by faith, flames, and tenuous compromise, it would be decided in one last decision. Would she maintain the silence, or talk, at last, and let the world hear why? Some legacies expire in courtrooms. Others are buried, suffocated in silence. The courtroom was closed. No cameras, no public, just wood-grain silence, fluorescent lights, and the gravity of all that had been spoken. Robyn Brown sat at the same table, with attorneys and silence around her. Her expression was immobile, but not her hands. They quivered, gently, tentatively, drawing circles upon the rim of her notepad. Cody sat behind her now, no longer to her side. He hadn't been summoned to the stand again. He had nothing further to add. Christine, Janelle, and Meri were not there. Their lawyers were. They had already testified as much as they had to. The courtroom was no longer theirs. It was for the woman who stayed after the house came tumbling down. The most powerful stories conclude not with flames, but with silence. The judge walked in. The room rose. He had no folder, no pile of papers, only one sheet and a piercing look. For weeks, the courtroom drama had been portrayed as one of money, stolen money, trust violation, alleged coercion over the family fortune. But it had become something else, altogether. A trial of influence, a picture of emotional leverage, an examination of one woman's subtle command of a crumbling legacy. The judge's words rang out unambiguous. In matters of financial dispute, we look for numbers. But in this instance, numbers are useless without motive. He paused. And then at last, the verdict. Robyn Brown had not been guilty of financial fraud. The evidence, though emotionally powerful, was not material certainty. No receipts, no trail of signatures, only suggestion. But the court was not done. You may outrun the law, but not the legacy. The judge found that Robyn was in steadfast bad faith towards the collective estate. She would be excluded from all remaining trusts related to the Sister Wives LLC. She would no longer receive royalties from future re-airs or derivative programming, either. And worst of all, she was prohibited from using family intellectual property without unanimous consent from the remaining members. Christine, Janelle, and Meri. The courtroom did not explode. There was no cry out, no shout. Only a weird, reverent stillness. A sentence not of jail, but of exile. Robyn dropped her head. Her lawyers whispered. She nodded, just once, and almost imperceptibly, and started packing up. Some punishments are not lost. They're about exclusion. Cody stayed in his seat. He did not exit with her. Outside the courthouse, a horde of reporters waited for Megan Lewi's ex-partner Robyn. But she didn't talk. She got into the back seat of a black SUV and disappeared into the desert air. No comment. No interview. 10 minutes later, Cody departed in solo. He appeared weary, not furious, not shattered, just hollow. Reporters engulfed him with questions. Do you still support her? What's next for your family? Will you appeal the ruling? He didn't say anything, just drove off in his truck. Behind the doors of the courtroom, clerks stashed papers into sealed records. But the true records, the ones in hearts, would never be sealed. They'd exist, online, in whispers, in tears, in side eyes around dinner tables. Because this wasn't a simple tale about Robyn Brown. It was a warning. What starts in love can finish in quiet conquest. Later that evening, a last photo appeared online. A fuzzy cell phone photograph. Robyn standing alone at an airport terminal, wearing sunglasses, looking straight ahead with no bag by her side. Only a purse and a printed boarding card. She didn't tell anyone where she was headed. Not even Cody. Rumors circulated. Oregon, Utah, Arizona. Some claimed she'd gone to be close to her own parents. Others hinted she'd been offered a quiet payoff by TLC in return for secrecy. No one could verify anything, but something was certain. Robyn no longer belonged to the Brown family, legally, financially, or emotionally. Christine made one final post, a photo of her daughters baking cookies, all smiling. The caption, "We found our peace. And we found it without fear." Janelle posted a sunset. Meri posted nothing. But the internet did. Redemption doesn't always have cameras. Sometimes it's just absent. Weeks later, TLC announced a hiatus. No spin-off. No new season. Just reruns. And rumors. The world of Sister Wives had imploded under its own gravity. Not with scandal but with fatigue. And Robyn, she disappeared. For the time being. But within the silence she created, her aura remained. In every quotation, every court filing, every piece of family she didn't create, but assisted in deconstruction. In the end, she was never convicted of a crime. But to the eyes of millions, she was guilty of something more profound. The undermining of confidence, disguised in sacrifice.